we thank you for joining us tonight for Texas's primary election coverage. It would help if I look at the right camera, Brian Mays there. I'm Ashley Goodo.
See the little red light, Ashley? That's the one. That's the one. I'm Brian Mays. The polls closed about 4 minutes and 27 seconds ago. So we're going to be bringing you the results all night long, expecting the first wave of results really any minute now, Ashley.
Yeah, and while we're waiting, let's talk a bit about that voter turnout. Now, we won't have Election Day numbers until later tonight, but we can look at early voting turnout.
That's right, Travis County, more than 82,000 voters cast their ballots during the early voting period. That's across both parties, Republican and Democrat. That includes mail-in ballots that were received during the early voting process. That's less now than 10% of all registered voters in Travis County. Not a lot, Ashley.
No, and in Williamson County, more than 41,000 people voted early or sent in their mail-in ballots during the early voting period. That's about 10% of registered voters in that county. Now, Brian, this isn't necessarily unusual in terms of early voting turnout. Typically in primaries, we only see about a quarter of all the registered voters in Texas cast ballots. Generally, we see about the same turnout or slightly more during the actual election day as early voting. So it'll be interesting to see what those numbers as they come in.
We're watching that. Of course, those will be the first numbers we get tonight, just after 7 o'clock. We're at 7:05 now, so we're expecting again those to come in at any point now. We'll get the early voting numbers, and then as we get the numbers throughout the night, we'll bring those to you all night long. Ashley, we've had a piece of pizza each now, so we are charged, we're energized,
yes,
and
we're looking
ready.
at the right cameras.
We're ready.
We're excited about it. You know, I do want to point out one thing about the early voting total. Sometimes people may be wondering, well, usually 7:02, we've got some numbers to look at. Well, things are a little bit different. Some things have changed under the new elections law that the state of Texas passed in terms of when ballots can be opened, when they can be counted, and things of that nature. So things may be a little bit slower coming in tonight, but it's one of those things that we're just going to have to wait and see.
Let's wait and see, and let's visit now with Maria Aguilera. She joins us now. Maria, officials getting some of those ballots counted. Where are you? What are you seeing tonight?
Brian and Ashley, we are at the South Park Meadows Shopping Center in South Austin, where there is a polling location here, just one of many in the Austin area. And we are seeing quite a bit of a line. I'm going to step out of the way so you can kind of take a look at what we're seeing here. This starts right here at this location. It's a Carter's, and then it really just kind of goes all the way into where the Hobby Lobby entrance is. So we're seeing kind of about close to maybe 100 people here in this line. Obviously, polls have closed, and so the people that are in line are going to be able to cast their ballots here. So this is just one of the locations, as I mentioned. And earlier today, we were at the George Morales Recreation Center, and it was a completely different story there. We were seeing people come and go at that polling location, but this is considered a mega center here in the South Austin area. So again, this is kind of what we're seeing right now. So that's going to be, you know, it's going to be a little while longer for all of these people to kind of cast their ballots. And so we're just going to stay here and let you guys know how things are looking here in this area. Of course, the people that are in line are still going to be able to cast their ballots, as I mentioned. But for now, again, this is at the South Park Meadows Shopping Center in South Austin. Brian and Ashley, I'm going to toss it back to you.
And Maria, thank you for that. You know, Brian, this is actually somewhat of a welcomed sight to see, considering the low voter turnout that we've seen all over this primary election, to actually see people out there waiting. Again, as long as you are in line by 7 p.m., you will be allowed to cast your ballot. And so that's what's really important. And we're certainly glad to see people exercising their right to vote, waiting. Hopefully there's no issues, you know, at that polling location, and they'll get to cast it with no problem.
And as you talked about, it's one of those odd years where the primaries are setting up for a November midterm. Of course, in Texas, that's a big deal because you've got a race for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, all on the ballot. Some of the races we're really interested to see how go tonight.
Oh, there are some. I get giddy just thinking about it.
She gets very excited about elections.
Excited about elections,
yes.
And just seeing democracy at its finest, seeing people getting out and voting. And so let's talk about some of the big races that we are keeping a heavy eye on tonight compared to what the polls said, Brian.
Yes,
last
just the polls,
month, right?
yes.
This is polling numbers. Last month, the Texas Politics Project polled 1,200 registered voters. Now, among the voters who said that they plan to vote in the Republican primary, 60% said they would be casting ballots for Governor Greg Abbott. The second closest candidate was the former chair of the Texas Republican Party, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, with 15%. So if it goes as planned, Brian, big night for Greg Abbott.
Should we go ahead and start? We're getting some results. I've got some results in. I don't know what the producer, just tell me in my ear what you want to do. Okay, we'll just go ahead then. The Democratic race for governor, former Texas Congressman, Beto O'Rourke, he's had a run here at Congress. He was a congressman for several years and now ran for U.S. Senate. Now he's running for governor. As you can see, the polling shows, this again, just the polling, these aren't votes. Beto O'Rourke, with the polling numbers, given a huge lead going into tonight's primary. Of course, Joey Diaz, some other, Michael Cooper has run for governor before. We see some familiar names there, but of course, most people thinking, at least those that know, thinking the Democratic race for governor is pretty much a shoo-in for Beto O'Rourke. We don't see the numbers yet, but we will, of course, get those to you as soon as we learn. And Beto O'Rourke could be in for an early night, Ashley, tonight.
Yeah, that's what his campaign certainly is planning for tonight, is that they will be well done, have this race called, before 10 p.m. So, for fun, if you will, pollsters, they like fun.
They do.
So they tried to see what would happen if they put Governor Greg Abbott and former Congressman Beto O'Rourke in a hypothetical matchup. Now, as of last month, Governor Abbott was polling at 47% to Beto O'Rourke's 37%. But I want you to look at that last number. That's 11% of those voters who said they haven't thought about it enough to have an opinion between those two candidates.
Can I give some of these results? Let's get some results going. I'm looking right at it. We've got 300 precincts reporting, according to KVUE.com, the governor's race on the Republican side. Greg Abbott with a sizable lead in the early voting, over 79,000 votes, with 71% of the vote in the early voting. Again, 300 precincts. That's about 10,000 votes. So Abbott with an early lead there. On the Democratic side, as we just talked about, Ashley, Beto O'Rourke, over 90% in the early voting, 306 precincts. Again, this is about 10,000 votes. And then I want to mention the Attorney General's race, because this is one.
Big race. This is a big race.
On the Republican side, right now at about 10,000 votes, 17 precincts in that race. Ken Paxton at just under 50%. Of course, he has to get to 50% to avoid the runoff. George P. Bush with 25%. Eva Guzman at 17. Louis Gohmert with 11%. Again, these are very early returns. Of course, this is just the preliminary early voting numbers, but about 10,000 votes in. That's an interesting race, Ashley, to watch as the night goes on.
And what's going to be really interesting, Brian, I think, to watch is Eva Guzman and George P. Bush, to see how those numbers shake out, because late in the election, we've seen more tension between these two candidates, particularly with Land Commissioner George P. Bush calling out the former Supreme Court justice. So it will be interesting to see how, that turns out. We do, though, want to toss things over to Erica Proffer, who is at the Governor Greg Abbott's watch party in Corpus Christi tonight. Erica, I hear the music behind you.
Ashley, it's taken all I can to not dance over here. But I will tell you, the band hasn't gotten on stage yet. This is where they will take. It's about 7:30 or so, more or less, I think, is when they're expected to take the stage. I've already seen a lot of folks coming in. Some beautiful folks from Brownsville traveled all the way up, about 3 hours up. We got locals here as well. And it's something that they're excited to see. I did give them a little bit of the numbers that you guys just said on air too, and so they were really happy to hear that. Yeah, happy to hear that. We'll be here all night. The governor is expected to make comments later tonight, around maybe 9 or 10 o'clock. And then, of course, we will have that live. It'll be, live on air or on our Roku and Fire. It'll also be online and on all of our social media channels. Ashley?
All right, thank you, Erica, reporting from Governor Greg Abbott's watch party in Corpus Christi. As we mentioned, we are starting to get some numbers in, so we've come on over to our new toy that they gave us to play with this election. We're so excited to bring you some in-depth analysis on these races, starting, of course, with the governor's race. Brian, what are we seeing over there?
Well, you can see about 206,000 votes tallied. Again, these are all the early voting numbers. Greg Abbott with a sizable lead, 70% of the vote, just about 71%. Huffines, of course, from Dallas, former state representative or state senator. In second, Alan West, former GOP chair in the state of Texas. So you can see how things are kind of lining up, kind of what we expected, Ashley. If you look in Dallas right there.
I do want to point out, though, we have a few more. Scroll up a bit, Brian. Yeah, there's some.
There we go.
He's got a lot of people running against him, Governor Greg Abbott does.
But you can see where these numbers are coming from, Ashley.
Right.
You can see up around Dallas County, Tarrant County, some of the numbers coming in there.
Yeah,
in
we can actually zone in on some of these and see like how the voting is going, which is really nice to be able to do. The other race, obviously, that we want to see is the Democratic candidates for governor. And look at that, just as we were saying, with 4% reporting, Beto O'Rourke, sizable lead at 92.4%. This is a big lead for him, Brian.
We kind of expected that. And as you can see on our graphic, the number in the middle is the number of votes they are trailing by. You can see Beto O'Rourke with 153,000 early votes, 4,496 for his closest competitor. This is kind of, Ashley, how we expected the night to go. Again, you can see on the map of Texas where we're getting the results from. They'll light up. You just saw one light up right there. Ashley, what county is that? Just north of, is that Bastrop County?
We're in Bastrop County, and you can see that those Bastrop counties, in terms of who they're voting for on the Democratic ticket, Beto O'Rourke, sizable lead. Let's go and see what the Bastrop County is reporting in the governor's race. This is a little bit more of a drop-off. This is kind of what we were seeing in the polling, Brian, with Alan West coming in second, Governor Greg Abbott at just under 70% there.
And that's about where we were tracking, Ashley. Bastrop County, just under 5,000 votes early. That's kind of what we were looking at as far as Bastrop County. We're going to be watching Williamson County, Travis County to see how the early votes come in. But Greg Abbott, many expect him to have a big night. The question, Ashley, is will he have more than 50%? It appears, looking at the early voting numbers that we're seeing right now, not just in Central Texas, but throughout the state of Texas, he's in pretty good shape as we go through the early voting numbers tonight.
And Brian, let's just be honest. That's what we're expecting for the rest of the night for the governor, is to have him in pretty good shape. But one of the things that is surprising is Rick Perry. No, not that Rick Perry, but there is a gentleman named Rick Perry running for governor, and he is getting some votes.
He is.
So it'll be interesting. In fact, let's go to the state totals, because I think we're still looking at Bastrop County. Yeah. And you can see that's a bit more than most people were anticipating.
Yeah, he would get. He's not at the bottom of the list as we scroll through, just under 8,000 votes. And you have to, I have to ask, Ashley, do you think people saw the name Rick Perry and voted for the former governor thinking that's who was on the list, when that's not the case?
That was, in fact, the strategy. This Rick Perry, you notice we don't even have a picture of this Rick Perry. I would encourage you to try to find a photo of this Rick Perry. You're not going to do it, because he was encouraged to run because of that name recognition. Now, it has been said, and I think that he's made not been shy about it, for the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, has said he would like to see former Governor Rick Perry run again. That, that is someone whom he strongly supports, but again, that's not this Rick Perry with the 2.9%. Okay, I know. You know which one I want to push next, don't you?
Well, should we go in order, or you want to go straight to it?
Oh, fine, Brian.
Let's go in order.
Go in order.
I think we know the Lieutenant Governor, how it's going to stack up on the Republican side. Yeah.
This is not surprising at all. Talk to us about these totals.
7,000 votes in. Dan Patrick, the incumbent on the Republican side, with nearly 80%. We weren't expecting anything other than what we're seeing here. Again, 0% reporting. This is early voting totals, but already just under 6,000 votes, just under 7,000 total. So you can kind of see where that's going. Ashley, on the Republican side, kind of what we expected from the Lieutenant Governor's race on the red side.
Now, I am going to say on the blue side, this is a race that I am watching for Lieutenant Governor, and I am going to tell you why. Two big newcomers to this race, Dr. Carla Braley, who is the former vice chair of the Texas Democratic Party, and State Representative Michelle Beckley, who, look at it just changing right before our very eyes.
It's technology right there, actually.
It is nice, isn't it? And Michelle Beckley, State Representative from North Texas. And this is interesting because we've not typically seen diversity in this pool. And so you will recall former Republican strategist Matthew Dowd was in this race.
He was on the Democratic side.
Against Mike Collier, who we should note ran for comptroller and then ran for lieutenant governor and came within about 5 points of Dan Patrick back in 2018. But Dowd dropped out when he got wind that Dr. Carla Braley was going to enter the race, because he has said the problem he believes with the Texas Democratic Party is a lack of diversity. So to be able to have not one but two women in this race, including a woman of color, interesting to see how this is going to shape out for the rest of the night, or if we're going to end up in a runoff.
You mentioned 2018. Let's just take a look back at how that stacked up. You can see Collier here again. This is just from the primary. Very close race on the Democratic side back in 2018. If you would actually hit the Republican side, clearly a big win for Dan Patrick. He was polling about this place going into this week,
right.
And that's clearly where he is currently with about 77% of the vote, almost exactly where he was 4 years ago on the Republican side.
And that's really not, I would say that that's not surprising. Dan and Patrick polls very highly. Republicans, at least the Republican base, who votes in primary elections, which we should note right now, as of right now, before we have the totals, 90% of the population is letting 10% of the population pick its candidates.
That's right. It's a shame, but you're right.
Yeah, and those candidates, and even if we go up to 20%, 25%, we let the minority pick for the majority. And so that's what we're seeing. Okay,
you're dying to hit it, Ashley.
Please, I just want to hit this button right here. I want to go to the Republican AG's race because,
look at that.
Change. I love when it changes right before our eyes. Obviously, we were talking a lot about Ken Paxton, the indicted attorney general, to have three elected officials running against him. So two statewide candidates and a congressman say that he was a threat to the Republican Party. And this is the point that they really tried to sell to voters, was that if Ken Paxton wins and is then indicted on this new FBI investigation and potentially goes to jail, you hand the seat to the Democrat, because you cannot put someone else on the ballot.
Once you win the primary, you're in. But actually, as we talked about, nobody's got 50% here. And you're very close between George P. Bush and Eva Guzman.
This is the race that I think it's going to go to a runoff.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be really interesting to see right here which one of those two get in.
And you can see up top 7% reporting, so still a lot of votes to cast before the night is over. Excuse me, a lot of votes to count and some to cast before the night is over.
Let's check in with our folks over in Bastrop County, since we are getting some totals
some
there.
Locals,
some local numbers. Again, this is what we're seeing, and it's really interesting to see how this is going to shape out for the night. Okay, well, Brian, they're playing the Oscar music for us.
Are we done? I'm having so much fun, Ashley. We didn't get to the Congressional District yet, the House.
Here's what we're going to do. We're just going to talk longer next time. How about that?
You think they'd let us?
I think they won't have a choice, right?
That's right.
All right.
They don't have a choice.
KVUE's Texas primary election results coverage isn't over yet.
That's right. We will be back at 7:30 in about 10 minutes from now. Enough time maybe to get another piece of pizza. We're watching the numbers all night long. I hope you'll tell us, or you'll tell some friends, we're on KVUE.com all night long with our primary election results. We'll see you at about 7:30.
It is election night in Texas. Thank you for joining us for KVUE's Texas primary election coverage. I'm Ashley Goodo.
And I'm Brian Mays. Ashley's bringing the energy tonight, so I hope you all can step it up with us. The polls closed about half an hour ago. Results trickling in now. We've been at the touch screen. We'll go back there in a bit. We also have a look at some other things coming up. Ashley, it's an exciting night.
It is definitely exciting. I'm not the only one getting excited about democracy here, people. Brian Mays, actually.
That's right.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get a look at some of those early returns as they're starting to come in. Let's start off with the governor's race.
Yes.
On the Republican side. Actually,
well, let me just tell you. Why don't I just tell you real quick? Because I got them right here in front of me, and then we've got a great interview coming up.
Shocker. Governor Greg Abbott is leading right now.
He's leading with almost 300,000 votes, so just over about 10,000, just over 1,000 precincts reporting. Is that right? No. That can't be right. Anyway, Governor Abbott at just about 70% of the vote on the Republican side. Beto O'Rourke at over 93% of the vote so far on the Democratic side. Here you see the numbers. That one actually pretty much a done deal.
Yeah, for sure it is. Pretty much just what we expected. In terms of the lieutenant governor's race, this is also going as we expected with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick in the Republican race.
78% of the vote there.
Yeah, he is definitely winning. Now, what's interesting is the Democratic candidates for lieutenant governor. That race a bit closer, Brian. What's the latest numbers you have over there?
Collier at 45% of the vote so far. About 26 precincts are what's being reported in that race. He's got about 48,000 votes compared to Michelle Beckley, who has now moved into that second spot with 33,000 votes. She's at 31%. Collier's at 45%, actually. So we talked about this a little while ago. Runoff territory for the lieutenant governor on the Democratic side. Collier, Beckley, Braley not far behind. She's at 23% now, Ashley.
Yeah, but of course the night is still young. And so with these numbers, what we're seeing right now could definitely change by the end of the night. The other race that we think is very, very interesting, going to be close, going to be interesting how it shakes out. That's the Attorney General race on the Republican ticket with incumbent Ken Paxton facing challenges from 3 elected officials, Brian.
You don't see this very often. And you know what? It's a close race, Ashley. Look at this. Ken Paxton not yet to that 50% mark. He's at 44%. George P. Bush has moved into the second spot. And then again on the lieutenant governor side, we just talked about that one. But on the Attorney General side, on the Republicans, in the Republican camp, Ken Paxton, George P. Bush, followed by Eva Guzman. She's at 20%. Louis Gohmert, the congressman from East Texas, at 15%. This has been a really high spending race. And I mean high spending by they're really spending a lot of money on the ads around the state of Texas. Ken Paxton, though, Ashley, he was hoping to get to that 50%. It's looking more and more as more of these votes come in. Could be in runoff territory there on that side.
And I think that's not surprising for a lot of people who follow politics. The thing we want to watch on that tonight that I'm looking at for sure is Land Commissioner George P. Bush, former Texas Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman. Which of the two of them is going to be who battles it out with Paxton? And you know, Brian, we can provide analysis all day, but we want to bring someone else in to talk to us a bit about this. James Barragan, who is with the Texas Tribune politics reporter. James, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us tonight.
Hey, good to be here with you on this exciting election night.
James, you've covered all of these races. I want you to tell me, just between us and whoever's watching here, which one is the top race you're watching?
Oh, I think you guys just talked about it. The Attorney General's race on the Republican side has got to be the one that most people are watching. You've got an incumbent in Ken Paxton who's been underwater from his own party. You can tell that because there were 3 high-profile names, and that's really playing out tonight as you see him below that 50% plus 1 threshold that he needs to avoid the runoff. And really, what's really exciting for political observers like us is that neck and neck that we're seeing with Land Commissioner George P. Bush and former Supreme Court Justice Eva Guzman. I mean, they are really, really neck and neck in every major county that I've seen thus far. Obviously, it's still early on; things can change, but it's shaping up to be an exciting night on that race.
And, Land Commissioner Bush was really on the attack here lately. It felt like in the last week, in the last 2 weeks of this race, whereas he wasn't really concerned. You saw him more attacking Ken Paxton. He really shifted his attacks towards Eva Guzman.
Yeah, well, George P. Bush had been consistently polling second throughout the race since there had begun polling, I think, in fall. What happened, I think, lately or towards the end of the race is that Eva Guzman really started gaining steam. You saw that in the Attorney General debate last Thursday, where Bush and Guzman just really went at each other. And then the next day, I think Ken Paxton put out an attack ad against her. So it's really been Paxton and Bush attacking Guzman, I think recognizing that she's sort of peaking at the right time.
James, let's talk about the lieutenant governor's race on the Democratic side. I know a lot of people are familiar with the name Mike Collier. Michelle Beckley, Carla Braley, both pretty good showing in the early voting numbers. Has that surprised you at all?
It hasn't surprised me, even though Mike Collier ran last time in 2018, and he's got good name recognition amongst the loyal Democratic voters. I think there was still enough room in that race for a challenger to emerge. And when you get there starts being three people in a race, then the runoff starts seeing like it's more of a likelihood. With Michelle Beckley, you've got, not a huge name, but she's got some name recognition, particularly in North Texas, and she was one of the Democrats who broke quorum last year to stop the election voting bill. So she was in D.C. She was on a lot of national television. She's got name recognition. Carla Braley, of course, is a party organizer, so she's got some name recognition. I'm not completely surprised that one is potentially in runoff territory, but I will be interested to see who that potential second person is. It looks like Mike Collier will be the first top vote getter, but I'm interested to see who comes in second.
Yeah, and really interesting, Carla Braley, while she has some name recognition, I would say probably more so in the Houston area, she is really a newcomer in terms of politics and running for office.
Definitely a newcomer to most voters. What she told me when we were talking in interviews for the race is that she is known to voters. She is known to the loyal Democratic voters who are the people who turn out in these elections. So it's sort of consistent with how she's sort of thought of this race, that she would be polling a little bit higher than sort of how we had expected if you're just a political observer and are not watching things every day. But it's still early in the night. We've only seen early voting. We've only seen it from a couple of counties, and let's see how things shake out.
James, I would love to hear your opinion since we're talking about Democratic races. The Attorney General's race on the Democratic side is quite the crowded race. What do you make of it?
I think that one's wide open as well. I think the polling has shown that Rochelle Garza, the former ACLU attorney, has been polling at the top of that race, but the highest that I've seen her is at 17%, which is nowhere near getting her to avoid a runoff. I see you guys are showing the numbers for Lee Merritt and Joe Jaworski. Lee Merritt is a civil rights lawyer. He's got big name recognition, has represented the families of Ahmaud Arbery, both of them John. So he's well known and he does a lot of television. So his name might get some recognition from voters if they're going into the voting booth and they don't know. And then Joe Jaworski was the first person, I think, to say he was running for a Democrat for AG. So he's been working it for a while now. And it'll be interesting to see. I think it will be Rochelle Garza at the top there. And then it's really between, I think, Lee Merritt and Joe Jaworski. They're fighting for second place. It's going to be interesting how that night plays out.
Indeed it is.
I'd like to ask you while we've got you, if you've got a second. This District 35 congressional seat on the Democratic side, the early voting numbers right now, Greg Casar, the former Austin council member, with a sizable lead out of 20,000 counted votes early. He's got 11,000 of them. Is that kind of the way you expected that one to go? Greg Casar, Eddie Rodriguez? I thought it would be a little closer than that.
I think for political observers, that one should be a lot closer. I mean, Eddie Rodriguez has represented the Austin area, particularly East Austin, for more than 15 years now in the State House. He's got a lot of name recognition. The problem for him is that Greg Casar also has huge name recognition as an Austin City Council member. He was a big push on a lot of the police reform stuff. He was a big push on the homelessness bans. And so he's got a lot of name recognition. And don't forget that CD 35 also stretches down I-35 and into San Antonio. Both of those places, I think Greg Casar actually has higher name recognition than Eddie Rodriguez, because in Hays County, that's an Austin TV market, as you all well know. And so if you're an Austin City Council candidate, your name is getting played a lot in those TV stations. And in San Antonio, he fought for a lot of the paid sick leave ordinances. He's done a lot of work down there. So it's a little bit less surprising, but I think it's definitely shocking for Eddie Rodriguez's camp. You would think that he would be doing a lot better than this showing so far.
Yeah, absolutely. James Barragán of the Texas Tribune, we thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us tonight and give us some analysis. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you. Have a fun night.
That was great to have James.
Indeed.
Good perspective.
Indeed.
Good
and he
perspective.
was talking about this race, and so we want to show you where the votes are coming in for the congressional race for District 35. You can see that, again, this is one of those oddly shaped districts, Brian. It goes, stretches from Travis County down to Hays, touch of Kamal, and then well into Bexar County. And what's particularly interesting, I think, about this district is this is the district that Congressman Lloyd Doggett has represented for a very, very long time in its many forms, because it has changed a lot. And so when we're looking at these totals, looking at these numbers, you know, Greg Casar, some may be surprised, but I think when you look at the national attention that he's drawn, endorsements from, you know, former presidential candidates, Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is so big in the progressive movement, I think that is why you're seeing some of this coming in. Again, very early, but that's a sizable lead there.
It really is. Of nearly 20,000 votes we talked about, he's got just about 12,000 of them, just under 60%, which is, of course, a great number for him. That would be if he could stay there. I mean, no runoff in this side, at least on this side of the Democratic primary for Greg Casar. Former Austin Council member Eddie Rodriguez poll are coming in just about 8,500 votes fewer than Casar. Again, these are very early numbers, 1% reporting, so a long way to go. But actually, I do want to kind of point out to our viewers the shape of the district once again. I think we can actually zoom in a little bit on that. You can see what we're talking about. That's just
Brian learned something I didn't get to learn. I missed this part of training. That
and my question: what happens if you live here, Ashley? What happens if you live right there?
You've
got a neighbor here and a neighbor here.
That's how it works. You're in separate congressional districts, even though you clearly share the same interests. You're clearly both, you know, urban and, you know, but it's Texas.
It's the district we have, 35.
We should note that this is one of those districts that historically judges have ruled that the state of Texas does discriminate against voters of color when drawing this particular district. So it'll be interesting, though, to see, you know, really how it shakes out. I think what we see, though, in Greg Casar and Eddie Rodriguez, to your point about you thought it would be closer, is two different styles of governance, two different styles of policy. Greg Casar is, Greg Casar and Eddie Rodriguez, both progressives, both fighting for progressive policies. But I think Eddie Rodriguez, with his time in the Texas legislature, takes the opinion of, I'm not going to sacrifice the good for the perfect. He's willing to compromise if it means he's going to be able to get something done. And because voters in Austin have trusted him and reelected him, he's been able to make little steps, you know, get some policy passed and then grow on it the next legislative session and then grow on it the next legislative session. A prime example of that is free breakfast for kids all over the state of Texas, being able to feed those children. That was something really important to him, something that was seen as by some as a handout, something the state shouldn't be paying for, but he worked at it. Whereas, you know, I think Greg Casar, when it comes to policy, when we look at what he's done in Austin, leading kind of the charge to what he would say decriminalize homelessness, things of that nature, he goes full gusto and he goes for it. And so I think that's where voters in our area are really grappling with as to who you're going to vote for. And you can see where he's leading. I believe if I hit this, you can see that Casar is sort of leading
the Travis County
in the
region.
Travis County area.
Yeah. What is the Republican side of 35 looking like as we have these early voting numbers? And Dan McQueen with about 1,100 votes there. He's in the lead. You can see a big group of candidates vying for the spot. Again, Ashley, a lot of people think that this specific district, Democratic heavy, so I don't know how much we'll know by the end of the night as far as the Republican side of things.
Right.
But just to give you an idea of where things stand on that side of the docket as well, we're talking about Congressional District 35. This is the old district that has now been moved. It's changed since the last time we saw Lloyd Doggett represent this district for many years.
Right.
And now he's in 37.
It used to just be Austin,
It
right?
was Austin,
it just used to be Austin, and it has since stretched down. And so, but Lloyd Doggett, we're talking about the past, so let's go to 37. So Texas's population grew so much between 2010 and 2020 that the state, we earned 2 congressional seats.
2 new seats.
2 new seats, and one of those seats, District 37, they decided to go ahead and give it to Austin. It is in the heart of Travis County, and this really more so resembles what Lloyd Doggett's district used to
be
look
35,
like.
kind of like that.
I think it was even a different number back then.
Yeah, that's true.
when it was that area, and so he wanted the chance to represent this area again, which is why he's running. And if you take a look at those early totals coming in, it seems like that name recognition really paying off, Brian.
Absolutely. 42,534 votes counted. He's got 35,468 of them. So about 83, a little over 83% of the vote. Again, that is looking like a Lloyd Doggett victory, at least in the early voting, just about 1% reporting. So we're not here to call any races, but that's a huge lead after you go through the early voting tally. And again, this is the new District 37, the new district that was created this time around. This is the first time we'll have someone in that seat from the state of Texas. So it looks like Lloyd Doggett is in a good position as we go through the early voting numbers tonight.
And we don't want to forget Wilco. You get a touch of Williams.
There's a little Wilco in there. Absolutely.
And so let's look at the Republicans, because let me tell you, there are a lot of people who would like to take this seat. You have Jenny Garcia Sharon, who, interestingly enough, ran against Lloyd Doggett for District 37 back in 2020. So she's also not a newcomer to Republican voters. Okay, we are now hearing that Beto O'Rourke is about to speak at his party over in Fort Worth. So we want to get to Mike Marute, who's there live. We're taking a look now at Beto O'Rourke as he is about to speak, and as we told you, right now he's coming in with 93% of the vote, with 21% of the precincts reporting a solid, sizable lead.
Fort Worth, how are we doing? Good to be with you. Let's hear it for Crystal Mason. Absolutely amazing. So courageous, so tenacious, so persistent. And not only does that describe her, it describes every single person here tonight. Because I'll tell you what, this group of people, and then some, in 2018, made me the first Democrat to win Tarrant County since 1994. And this group of people, and then some, are going to make me the first Democrat to be governor of the state of Texas since 1994. This is on us. This is on all of us. Listen, I feel extraordinarily lucky to be here with you tonight. It looks like from the early returns, I will be your nominee for governor for the state of Texas. And because we knew that there'd be such a great group of people out, fired up, a little bit of alcohol in their systems, I've only asked my entire family to join me once on this campaign, and it is tonight. This is my wife, Amy, my son, Henry, my daughter, Molly, my son, Ulysses, and our friend Wallace back there. They wanted to be with us tonight on election night here in Fort Worth in Tarrant County. Tell me there's a more important place in Texas for us to be, a more important place for us to win than this one right here. And we have traveled the breadth and the length of this state, starting out in the westernmost county, in the mountain time zone, in the Chihuahua Desert, connected to Ciudad Juarez, our sister city, El Paso, Texas. And whether I'm in El Paso, whether I'm in Louisville, whether I'm in Texarkana, which is as far away as you can be and still be in the same state, I find the most amazing, the most beautiful, the most creative, the most inspiring people on the planet. This is our home. And the beauty in this state and our values, we work hard and we do good work and we're good to one another. That's not reflected in those who hold power and positions of public trust in this state right now. The things that we want are not just good for Democrats. They're not just good for Republicans or independents either. They are good for all of us. We want to make sure that the best jobs in the United States of America are created right here in the state of Texas. Right? Argue that one. We want to make sure that we get behind our world-class public school educators so that we have world-class public schools in the state of Texas. We all want that. We want to make sure that we finally expand Medicaid so that people can see a doctor. No one dies of diabetes or curable cancer or the flu. And don't you think it's time that we legalize marijuana in the state of Texas? I do too. We can get that done. But in order to make that happen, we've got to get past the incompetence, the corruption, and the cruelty of Greg Abbott. Are you with me on this? I mean, this guy cannot even keep the lights on in the energy capital of the world. This guy has presided over a child protective services system and the foster children within it who are sleeping on desks in the hallways right now because we don't have the resources or the attention or the accountability that they deserve. This guy may say he's pro-life. I think he's just pro-birth. We are going to be pro-kids no matter where they are or who they are in this state. This crazy, aggressive pursuit of transgender children in our communities and in our schools and in their families, when we have real challenges in the state of Texas right now, like 7 out of 10 fourth graders cannot read at grade level. And it's not that our kids are any worse than the kids in other states. It's not that our teachers are not trying hard. In fact, they're working 2 or 3 jobs just to support their main job right now. It's because we have so underpaid those teachers and started to attack them from the highest positions of power. When I am governor, we are going to support public educators and public education and make sure that every child has the resources and support that they need to be able to get ahead. We're going to make sure when I'm governor that we keep the light on in the state of Texas, the heat flowing, the water running, and that we make sure that everyone understands that this state is big enough for all of us. That the leadership in Texas truly reflect the genius and diversity of the people in this state. That we don't have to be afraid of one another or pitted against each other or further polarize an already divided state. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you are a Republican, and I hope you're here tonight, or an independent, or we certainly have some Democrats in the House as well, I want to be a governor for each and every single one of you, and I want to bring us together to do the big things that we are truly capable of once we get past the smallness and the cruelty and the divisiveness of this moment. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to build upon our gains that we all realized together in 2018, then it's going to take all of us doing all that we can with what we have, where we are right now. And just as Crystal urged us to do, we've got to sign up to volunteer. And we've got to join an army of volunteers out there, a peaceful army that over the course of February has been trying to knock on every single door in every one of the 254 counties of Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you tonight that so far 53,000.
I'm your candidate. That is Beto O'Rourke's message for really all of Texans. He said Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians. He overwhelmingly has a lead in the primary election. This is what we expected, Brian.
Not unexpected at all, but we're also hearing a little bit of news on the Republican side tonight, Ashley.
Yes, we are. Challenger Don Huffines, who is a Republican challenger for Governor Greg Abbott, has conceded just a few moments ago in a statement saying he is not going to challenge the results that come out tonight, but also saying he's not going away. He also, Brian, if you are familiar with Senator Huffines, former Senator Huffines, taking credit for pushing Governor Greg Abbott to the right, or further to the right, as some would say, on some issues, but he is conceding tonight. At last check, he was in third place on that race, with the governor having a sizable lead.
I'm pulling that up right now as we're going to take a quick break. You're right, Governor Abbott with nearly 70%. Huffines actually in second place, but just 12%. So, of course, we're going to keep an eye on all of these races. We're going to have the very latest from the Smart Board coming up. Our digital coverage continues. Ashley, the Smart Board's not for me, that's for you. Smart. I'm not the smart one.
I like the name, Smart Board. election night in Texas, and we thank you for joining us for KVUE's Texas primary election coverage. I'm Ashley Goodo.
And I'm Brian Mays. The polls have closed for about an hour now. We're continuing to follow the results from all across KVUE's 12-county viewing area and the state of Texas, in fact.
Now, as we start to get some of those results in, we are joined by Jim Henson from the UT Texas Politics Project, because he's going to talk to us about the polls versus the results. And this is a really exciting topic, Ryan.
Let's start with that, Jim. How are things going from what you expected to what we're seeing?
Well, so far what we've been seeing, and again, these results are preliminary. We're still early in a lot of these races, although results are coming in pretty fast from some of the big counties. Not a lot of big surprises, and I think where we expected there to be uncertainty in the polling based on the public polling, both that we've done and that we've seen from other folks. We're seeing that. So in the Attorney General's race, there's been a lot of movement in that race on the Republican side. Eva Guzman and George Bush, at the last numbers I saw, were very close, have been moving back and forth. Two candidates have spent a lot of money against incumbent Ken Paxton. I think the big news out of that race is that the expectation that's been building in the last week that Attorney General Paxton is bound for a runoff seems to be coming true, and that Attorney General race on the Republican side was kind of two races. It was Paxton versus Gohmert and Guzman versus Bush. The Guzman versus Bush race is still very much going on. In a sense, Louis Gohmert has had the impact we expected, in that, based on the assumption that Louis Gohmert's votes are the votes that he takes are votes that were most likely Paxton. Gohmert's entrance in that race has been a real fly in the ointment and a spoiler for Ken Paxton.
Yeah, fascinating. And we want to point out some points about that poll. Jim, we really jumped into it. You guys last month, into January, first weeks of February, talked to 1,200 registered voters, asked them which one of the primaries they plan to vote on, and then looked at the numbers and the data from there. Right. So let's talk about the Republican governor's race. So the results as they stand right now, we said just moments ago, Don Huffines actually conceded and put out a statement. Governor Greg Abbott sitting at about 69% of the vote. Don Huffines was in second place at 12%, followed by the former chair of the Texas Republican Party, Alan West, and then Rick Perry, not that Rick Perry, but another Rick Perry at 3%. There are even more candidates in this race if we want to flip to the next slide there. But there are some other candidates all polling at 3% or less. And when we looked at what you all found on the poll, you found that 60% of those voters said that they were going to vote for Abbott. So 60%, we're at 69 right now. We want to point out still early in the night. But this is pretty close.
Yeah, we were in the field, in the first couple of weeks of February, and these are always estimates at a point in time. I won't fib and say we're not, it always feels good to be, in the ballpark and to be plausibly close. There was still a lot of movement to be had, I think, at that point between West and Huffines, and we're seeing that. And I suspect we're going to see that a little bit more in the rest of the night. So, I think that, what we're seeing tonight, what we've seen in most of the polling, both ours and again, the polling we've seen others do, was that Governor Abbott, this was his race to lose. And I think that there were, there was some evidence that there were Republicans giving other people a look. But the governor's been running this race for a year and a half. He knew he was going to be challenged from the right side of the spectrum, and he just didn't leave much room for other candidates to get much traction to his right.
We've already heard from Beto O'Rourke tonight, Jim. He's been campaigning against Governor Abbott the entire time. Nothing's really changed there. But now going forward, how does his stance kind of change as now we kind of know where we're going to be for the next few months?
Well, man, you're right. In a lot of ways, this general election campaign, certainly for Beto O'Rourke, started the day he declared back in November. Not a lot of surprises here. I think we had former Congressman O'Rourke at 93%. And once you got somebody polling in the 90s, what the exact number, it doesn't really matter very much. So going forward, I think, the big question for Beto O'Rourke is, does he have to adjust his message as this campaign enters the formal general election phase? I was interested to hear in the beginning of his speech, the first line of his attack on Governor Abbott was the first line of his attack on Governor Abbott when he declared his candidacy, which was his criticism of the failure of the power grid. And I think the problem with that is that there's it's understandable that the Democratic campaign is focusing on that. Our own polling has shown a lot of anxiety about the grid still a year later that I think a lot of us have experienced, and a lot of doubt that what's been done. On the other hand, moving the needle in terms of what people say are the most important problems that they're worried about.
I do want to ask you about the Democratic race for lieutenant governor. No big surprises in terms of the Republican side of the ticket with Dan Patrick leading, but this particular race with the candidate in Mike Collier, who's ran for statewide office twice now, who has had, some name recognition, came really close to Dan Patrick in 2018, to now be looking towards a runoff. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think Mike Collier was in a tough spot here. On one hand, you're right. I mean, there was no doubt going into this race or going into this campaign that he was going to run again, because he did come pretty close to Dan Patrick in the last go-round in 2018. Well, what I think this underlines is that Democrats really had the wind at their backs in 2018. And that's not what the environment looks like in 2022. And in terms of Mike Collier's position, it's understandable that Mike Collier would say, look, I should get another shot. I came close last time. But the truth of the matter is he may not have come close last time solely on his own power. It may also have been that the context was very favorable. With three candidates in this race, it's not going to be a surprising outcome if these numbers hold and we wind up in a runoff. But again, this is another race where it's still a bit early, and I would expect this to move around a little bit.
Yeah, Jim, we're having a little bit of a problem with your connection here, so I think we're going to stop here. We thank you so much, though, for taking some time to chat with us tonight. Should point out that you guys called it that this was going to be a runoff. It looks like what you called to happen. I say you called it. You did polling. You're just reporting on the numbers, but you're a very smart person. You've got the analysis down, and what you said was going to happen is happening. How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel like you're right. I'm sorry that the connection's not good, but we should probably quit while I'm ahead.
Fair enough. All right, that is Dr. Jim Hinton from the Texas Politics Project at the University of Texas at Austin, talking with us tonight. We thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us. We appreciate you.
He's great. I like listening to him talk. He's got that soothing voice.
It's so soothing.
And it really is great to see how close the polling was, at least early, to where we're seeing the results tonight.
Here's why, because polling gets a bad rap, but at the end of the day, one, it's still the best thing we've got.
Yeah, it's all we've got.
And two, well, you got the money, Brian. You got the fundraising.
That's true.
It's the best thing we got, and this proves, it does well. This is what we wanted to come back to, and we wanted to talk to you guys about. Before the break we took, we were listening to Beto O'Rourke, who was in Tarrant County, and he chose to be in Tarrant County tonight because Tarrant County elected him way back when do you remember way back when he was running for Senate against Senator Ted Cruz? And this was a surprise, because this is where you're starting to see some of these areas that used to be typically were red pulling for blue candidates. And his message was really that's what it's going to take in order to defeat Greg Abbott. Brian, run us through the numbers. We're looking just at his Tarrant County numbers here.
Yeah, well, you can see a huge advantage, which we expected going into tonight. But if Beto O'Rourke is going to challenge Greg Abbott when we get to November, I want you to look at the map, and you can see the totals that we have here. This is all blue because this is the Democratic side, but you can see in the Dallas area, Tarrant County, Dallas County, He was strong there. He was strong in Houston. You can see Harris County down here, Brazoria County. Very good numbers for Beto O'Rourke there tonight. And then let's go to the Austin area and start up in Williamson County. Again, a huge number on the Democratic side for Beto O'Rourke with over 14,000 of the 15,000 votes. Not really a contest. That's in Williamson County. Hit Travis County, and you can see that he's way ahead there as well. Ashley?
Okay, you know, we're going to break now because Greg Casar is now speaking. He is running for District 35, and he's speaking to his supporters now. Let's listen in.
A strike calling for dignity for working people, a rally lifting up the voices of people that too often get left out, the kind of movement that has deep roots here in Texas. That list of 25 pages of people was our list. It included so many of y'all. I am so grateful to so many of you who have been a part of it since then. And we built that movement, calling through that list, standing on the shoulders of people fighting for workers' rights in Texas for generations before us, knowing that the world as it is not the world as it must be. And we organized that strike, and we organized rally after rally, not just through elections, but on the streets. We built this movement here in Austin, down to San Antonio, up and down I-35. Throughout this state, we built this together. We built it striking at fast food restaurants, fighting for 15. We built this fighting for survivors of sexual assault. We built it fighting for paid sick days. We built it standing up for our unhoused brothers and sisters. We built it marching in the streets in the movement for Black lives. We built this together through wins and losses. Hundreds of us on those call sheets, thousands of us added to it. Some of y'all who weren't on that call sheet wound up on it because now I didn't call you, I called somebody that called somebody else that called you. We built this together, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And tonight, yes, we celebrate this election, but we also really celebrate the progressive movement in Texas. Because you can win and lose elections, but you don't stop a movement. And you can pass laws and laws can get taken away, but you can't take away the inspiration in someone's heart. You can't take away organizing. And tonight's victory is a testament to that movement and that organizing here in Texas. So yeah, tonight we won, but it wasn't about me. This election was about us. This election was about the power of the people. This election was about the power of our movement. Yes, I got lots of votes on this ballot, but actually $15 an hour won tonight. Medicare for All won tonight. The PRO Act won tonight. Reproductive rights won tonight. Immigrant rights won tonight. The movement for Black lives won tonight. LGBTQIA rights won tonight. Working families won tonight. We did that together, y'all. We did it together. I am just so deeply honored to have been a part of this together with you. And I'm so deeply honored about what we're going to get to do next. Because I feel such a huge responsibility that you have placed in me, but I know I don't have to carry that alone. I carry that alongside hundreds of volunteers, alongside hundreds of thousands of doors knocked and phone calls made. You all gave so much. But you didn't just give these last 4 months, you gave a lot these last few months. But you have given for years, and many of you have given for decades longer than I have been alive, and we have so long to go, because as long as I am vertical, we are fighting to make our democracy work for working people in Texas. Let's go! Let's go! So now, I bring out a piece of paper because I have a lot of people to thank. First of
You've
all,
been listening in to former Austin City Council member Greg Casar, who is claiming victory in the race for Congressional District 35 as the Democratic candidate. He was running against State Representative Eddie Rodriguez, former San Antonio City Councilwoman Rebecca Villagran, and Carlos Joy Cisco.
And here's the numbers, Ashley. You can see he's about 60%. That's a little over 13,500 votes. This is kind of what he's looking at. He's nearly 10,000 votes ahead of Eddie Rodriguez with just about 23,000 votes counted. That's a 16% reporting number, but Greg Casar, again, a pretty sizable lead as you go through those early voting totals and the early results from this election day. Again, this is District 35. The seat that
35.
Yeah, 35, the seat that used to be held by our friend
Lloyd Doggett, Congressman Lloyd Doggett, who's running for 37.
Yeah.
You can see why we're getting that letter.
35, 37. Where's 36 again? I missed 36. It's somewhere
It's
on there.
somewhere else,
But
not
Greg
in our area.
Casar, no doubt a good night for him. He's got some pretty big endorsements, and it looks like all that paid off as he's going to be, it looks like, the Democratic
and we
candidate.
just for a moment of transparency, we say it looks like because we here at KVUE do not call races, and this race has not been called. So Casar is calling the race. We checked, and State Representative Eddie Rodriguez, Rebecca Villagran, Carla Joy Cisco, they have not conceded as of yet, but he, again, speaking to the crowd tonight because he does have, I mean, a 10,000, almost 10,000, 9,600 vote lead. That's hard to make up, Brian.
That's a big chunk of Travis County. You can see on the map where this district begins and ends. It's one of those unique redrawn districts, and it is heavy in Travis County, which of course is where Greg Casar drew a lot of his support from. We just heard from him there, and he again is indicating that he feels he's got the nomination on the Democratic side, or the polling is showing, at least right now, the results we've got in.
And I believe if you tap his name, does it show us? No.
No.
Okay, I was thinking it would.
Statewide, I think it would, but this is Corsa.
This is a different race, right?
Different race.
We're still getting used to our new toy.
Nice,
Brian is the
it's
expert
very nice,
on the toy.
though, isn't it? I love it.
Okay, so really exciting news about this race. If we just want to go ahead and look at the Republicans, because I think that is a fair thing to do, and there are several. So what we're showing there are still more. There are a lot of Republicans who would like to face off against whomever is going to win this race, presumably Greg Casar, but this has traditionally been a Democratic district. And this is what I was looking at. So this is what I wanted to do with Greg Casar, but you can see where Dan McQueen is leading here in these counties that are purple. So you can see that he has most of the vote. And so if we actually go back to the Democratic side, you can see just how strong the vote is.
It's all blue.
For the heat. And that is Casar's color here on our map.
Because if we touch green, it goes away.
Right.
Blue.
You can see he's not. So he has the most lead. It's not a solid blue. Again, there were votes for the other candidates, but he is strong in there. Before we started talking about Greg Casar, we were deep in analysis, Brian.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were.
About Tarrant County and the gubernatorial election. And so I want to go back. I want to go back to that.
Okay.
Because that is where Beto O'Rourke was. And this was the point that we were making. And this is the thing that's really going to be hard for him. Test for me to see if I hit Tarrant County.
There it is.
Got it on the first try.
Nailed it.
This is what I wanted to show you. 94% overwhelming lead. And he thanked the people of Tarrant County because he said that this is what's going to get him to win. Hit that 2022 for me, Brian Mays.
Looking back at 2018.
What happens in 2018? What do you notice there?
Well, it's in Tarrant County. It was very close. You had runoff territory. Lupe Valdez, who ultimately won the Democratic nomination for governor. Andrew White, who's had a strong showing in Central Texas, but obviously didn't have enough in Tarrant County. But very split is what I noticed.
Absolutely.
Very different than what we saw tonight with Beto O'Rourke.
And so if we look at those state totals, and you see just how much overwhelming support O'Rourke has. If you compare that to 2018 again, you can see that support is split. Andrew White, son of former Governor White for the state of Texas from Houston, had a lot of support, had some Central Texas support, had some, support in other areas. That is, again, not really the case, though, which is not to discredit Lupe Valdez, former Dallas County Sheriff. She won this race and had Dallas and had San Antonio and had Austin. But to see such overwhelming support for a candidate across the state.
Beto O'Rourke had a great showing in the Dallas area, which we expected. I don't think, like Jim Henson said, I don't think anything is really surprising as far as the governor's race goes. You've had Governor Abbott had a great showing, as we expected. Beto O'Rourke clearly going to be the Democratic candidate for governor once we get to November. Very strong showing for him, especially as we talked about in the Dallas area, which, let's be honest, Ashley, he's got to do well there in November if he hopes to have a chance to win that seat.
He's going to need to do well everywhere. Let's just be honest. A Democrat hasn't won a statewide seat in the great state of Texas since 1994.
1994 was a long time ago.
What was your hair looking like back in 94,
I was a
Brian?
tour guide at the state capitol that year.
Were you really?
I really was.
Wow.
Ann Richards was around, and it was a very nice time for me, young Brian, and as a college student.
That is a fantastic. There's your little known fact about Brian Mays. This is the kind of in-depth coverage you're only going to get when you watch our primary coverage.
Let's look at the AG's race one more time, Ashley. Let's see if we've got
my favorite race of the night.
18% now. We're going up. Boy, look at that. It's getting closer. It's getting closer.
This again is sort of the exciting race that we wanted to see, and particularly when you look at where the votes are coming in. So I know that.
Look at Gomer in East Texas.
I wanted to point this out. East Texas is showing up for their congressman, and that's really not surprising, Brian. Now, one of the things that you do want to look at is you'll notice you don't see any yellow on this map, and you just see a touch of orange here. Excuse me, purple. Let me get my colors together.
That's George P. Bush.
That's where he's leading. So that's not to say that he's not getting votes in other counties. Same thing with Eva Guzman. It's just he's only leading in 2 counties. Ken Paxton leading in these counties, but as you see, it's really not enough to secure him for a place in November.
No, and it just went down a little bit more. We can see runoff territory again, 50%. He's dropped about 4 percentage points just in the last hour, just in the early voting that we've got in the early returns from today. But again, Ken Paxton showing well across the state, just not quite enough for 50% to avoid the runoff. This is the race, Ashley. This is the competition I'm looking forward to seeing tonight between Eva Guzman, former Supreme Court Justice, and George P. Bush, Land Commissioner. You can see they're very close. And look at the totals here. 164,000 to 150. That's 5,000 votes separating those two. That's out of 774,000. That's a close race.
Again, this is where it gets good and it gets juicy. The best way to look at this race is that it was 2 races in one. You had Ken Paxton and Congressman Louis Gohmert, both highly favored by President Donald Trump. Now, President Donald Trump did endorse Ken Paxton, but you can see that Congressman Gohmert was able to chip away at that support. And then you've got the race between Eva Guzman and George P. Bush. And that's the one that Brian Mays and I are about to get off the air and make some friendly wagers about.
That's right. Maybe a few phone calls, see where people are standing on this. This is going to, I have a feeling, Ashley, this is going to be one we're watching right up until 10:30, 11 o'clock tonight as these late numbers come in. Of course, polls closed at 7, about an hour and a half ago, so it's going to get interesting over the next several minutes, several hours.
Indeed, it is, and we'll be right back with more of our primary election results coverage for you coming up at 8:30. Stick with us. joining us. We thank you for joining us tonight for KVUE's Texas primary election coverage. Big night in Texas. I'm Ashley Goodo.
And I'm Brian Mays. We are having some fun, getting a lot of information. It's changing by the second, so we're glad you're here with us. We're continuing, of course, to follow the latest results in the Texas primary election tonight. Ashley, are we having fun yet?
Oh, I was having fun this morning. I'm super stoked. And I feel like you're feeling my energy now.
I am.
You're on my train. You're on the Ashley train now.
I am full on ready for some more results tonight. Let's take a look at some of these election results as we have them in. As expected for the governor's race, Ashley, it's going to be Abbott versus O'Rourke. Huff Fines and Allen West and Rick Perry. Not much of a showing compared to the incumbent, Greg Abbott, with just about 70%. He's going to be running for governor once again in November.
All right, that check mark means the AP, the Associated Press, has called this race with 24% of the precincts reporting for Governor Greg Abbott. If we take a look at the Democratic challenger, as you mentioned, such a strong showing tonight for Beto O'Rourke, who's walking away with 92% of the vote. Just a landslide win for him tonight, Brian.
We've already heard from him. He's in Tarrant County once again up in Fort Worth. He was excited about what he had accomplished, but looking forward to the summer months into November. We've talked about it, Ashley. He's kind of been campaigning against Greg Abbott the entire time. That's not going to change, of course. It'll be Abbott, O'Rourke for governor coming up in November.
All right, let's talk about the lieutenant governor's race. No big surprises here if we can get to the Republican candidates. It's still not a called race yet, but look at that lead for incumbent Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick with 78% of the vote. The next closest person, Tracy Bradford, with 6%, Brian. So really a strong showing for the lieutenant governor tonight.
Again, kind of what we expected on the Republican side, but on the Democratic side, Ashley, you told me this was going to be one to watch. And on the Democratic side for lieutenant governor, I thought Mike Collier would be kind of a shoo-in. Not the case. He's not even at 50%, as we see now with about 13% of the vote. Michelle Beckley, Carla Braley, both with strong showings, Ashley, early on in the results that we're seeing here tonight.
I'm just basking in the glow of the fact that you admitted just now that you didn't believe me when I told you that this was going to be a race to watch. But it's fine. Maybe you'll listen to me going forward.
He's up against two strong candidates that really campaigned well, and that's showing up tonight. You can see Braley and Beckley both still in the hunt, looking for that runoff in May.
Yeah, going to get still we want to say 13% reporting, so we still got a little bit of a ways to go.
You're right.
But you know, this is going to be hard to make up when you're looking at these numbers. All right, let's talk about what might be the hottest race of the night.
The most talked about race, I can tell you that much.
For sure. And that's the Republican race for Attorney General. Oh, it's getting so juicy. I can't even take it with Eva Guzman and George P. Bush running neck and neck. 3 elected officials decided to challenge incumbent Ken Paxton. All 3 telling me on Texas this week that they saw him as a threat to the Republican Party because he is under investigation for those whistleblower allegations. He is indicted. And so saying that they had to step up and they had to run, and it looks like this race is headed to a runoff.
It looks like it, and who's the runoff going to be between Paxton
That's the juicy part.
And Bush or Guzman? Still to be decided. On the other side, on the Democratic side, Rochelle Garza with 41% looks very much like a runoff between maybe Garza and Jaworski. Maybe Merritt makes a plunge. Again, we've got 13% reporting here, so still a long way to go on the Democratic side for Attorney General as well.
Okay, now this race that we're going to next talk about, I think we're going to talk about the comptroller's race, and this is really not surprising at all. I think that comptroller Glenn Hager gets so, he's well known. He is, I would say, well liked. It's a pretty low-key statewide race. He does his job, and so not real surprising that he is winning right now with 83% of the vote. If we take a look at the Democrats who are running,
again, we're not calling anything, but it looks Hagar looks really good there.
Right. It looks like it's looking good for Janet Dubbing as of right now. This is 12% reporting. She's at 50% of the vote. So again, just looking pretty steady for her.
We have a guest, I believe, to join us now. It's Glenn Smith with Progress, Texas. It's a pleasure to have you on this very exciting night tonight. What are your early thoughts, Glenn, on what you're seeing in the early results tonight?
After watching this game for a really, really long time, let me start by saying I completely share y'all's enthusiasm for election nights. I love them. I've always loved them. It's better than going to the horse races because in the end it matters and you don't have to throw away your ticket. I'm not surprised by Abbott's strong showing, called it from early on. I didn't think any of the candidates mounted any kind of real campaign against the governor. I think he ran away with it. Likewise, the lieutenant governor. I'm not surprised at Beto's extraordinarily strong showing. He's very, very popular among Texas Democrats, and he was bound to get in the 90% before this thing even started. I am mesmerized by the Republican primary for Attorney General to watch the incumbent, Ken Paxton, who has in recent months done every possible thing he can to cater to what he believed was the Trumpian base of the Republican Party. And it is letting him down tonight, as it looks like he's headed into a runoff with George P. Bush or Eva Guzman, one or the other. We'll see how it turns out. I think that's a major event. And I think there might be a harbinger here, if you'd allow me. I would watch what happens going forward in the Texas election scenario because of event in Ukraine and people falling away from Donald Trump, who, by his own words, let himself be really close to Vladimir Putin. So watch for the impact of that in the months to come.
You know, Glenn, I do want to take a moment to ask you, though, about the Democratic race for lieutenant governor. This is something where I think some observers, some political observers, not necessarily surprised by what's happening with this race, but no clear winner after tonight. It looks like this race is headed to a runoff. What does that mean about the Democratic Party, about the policies and what they want to see in a candidate to take on Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick?
Well, I think it says that they're very focused on the race and they have their preferences, right? I think they're all three strong candidates, right? And it's a diverse slate of candidates they had to choose from. I'm not really surprised when you have strong candidates like that. I mean, you're looking at a guy who is a veteran of Ann Richards' successful gubernatorial race in 1990, when she was forced into a runoff and went on to a landslide victory in the general election. So I don't think this means that the eventual winner of the Democratic primary won't give a really good, strong campaign against Patrick, but it's going to be fun to watch and fun to unfold. And I'm happy to see the competition. Actually, I think it's good for us as a party.
You know, I also want to ask you about a race that had some strong candidates, and that's Congressional District 35. You had former Austin City Council member Greg Casar against State Representative Eddie Rodriguez, against former San Antonio City Councilwoman Rebecca Villagran. I want you to talk to us, and I can't, of course, forget Carla Joy Cisco. I want you to talk to us, though, about the showing in this. Casar claiming victory in this race. The AP hasn't called it yet, but he is saying that, you know, he won. We heard from him earlier tonight, talking to his supporters, talking about those progressive policies are what really won this race for him.
Well, I'm not so sure in this case it was the policies that won it for former City Councilman Casar. I think he worked really hard. I think he was everywhere. I think he was asking everybody he could ask for their votes. I think it was a personal victory, not so much a policy or an ideological victory. I just think he worked really hard at it. I don't know about the other candidates. I'm sure they worked hard as well. But I can tell you from being out and about, at least in this end of the district in the Austin area, Greg was everywhere all the time. And I think that's what carried the day for him. I'm not sure voters were picking this particular ideology or this particular policy. I think they picked him because they saw him at their events. And I think they liked that.
Glenn, let's go back to the top of the ticket in Texas in the governor's race. Beto O'Rourke has been campaigning against Greg Abbott the entire time he's been in the race. Now it's those two that are going to be head-to-head for the next few months. Does his tone change? Does his message change? I'm talking about Beto O'Rourke. Does his message change between tonight and the next few months going forward, do you think?
Well, I think at some point it will, but I wouldn't advise him to change too much. This is going to be an election that's a referendum on Greg Abbott and his failures. So I think that Beto has to keep talking about those failures. They're uppermost in people's minds, and I think he's got to stay after it. Sooner or later, like all candidates, and he's got to kind of like salt it in now too, talk about what he wants to do differently, right? And talk about his vision for the future of Texas. He will have to do that. It's sort of a traditional model of campaigns leaving a primary like this. They'll be hitting, you watch, they'll be hitting one another hard. Governor Abbott's going to come out of the gate hitting Beto as hard as Beto's ever been hit. And you can just count on that. And I think the reverse is true. I think Beto will do that to Governor Abbott. sooner or later, they have to give all of us, the voters of Texas, a vision of what they want to happen the day after the election and Inauguration Day next year. And I think they'll get to that. But, you know, we have some tough, you know, some rough and tough campaigns here in Texas. So it may be a while before we get to the happy days of the campaign when they talk only of the future.
For sure. These two have been fighting before Beto O'Rourke even announced he was running for governor. You have to remember Governor Greg Abbott putting out ads about him before he had even entered the race. So it's one of those ones that I anticipate is going to get a little nasty. Glenn, we thank you, though, for taking some time to chat with us tonight.
I'm so happy to be with you, and keep up the enthusiasm. You're fun to watch.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Great insight there from Glenn Smith with Progress Texas. As we talked about all night, Ashley, it's been a fun night just to kind of watch the returns come in. And we've got reporters spread out all over, not just Central Texas, but the state of Texas tonight.
We do. And we want to go to senior reporter Tony Plahetsky, who is at one of the races that we've been watching the most. What I like to, I've said it's the juiciest race on the ballot. Tony, you are at George P. Bush's watch party. What is the atmosphere like right now?
I mean, it's so juicy, we're like dripping out here. Actually, it's a pretty chill atmosphere. You know, there's some music behind us, several people at picnic tables here just kind of talking and visiting, but a pretty relaxed atmosphere. I do want to tell you that inside I can see former Florida Governor Jeb Bush, whose son is, of course, George P. Bush. We did hear from George P. Bush at the beginning of the night, around 7 p.m. He came out to address reporters, going into the night really enthusiastic, saying that he very much was hopeful that he would force this race into a runoff and that he would declare a victory for his own campaign if he were to enter a runoff with Ken Paxton. Of course, as we know, as we approach 8:45 or so now, it's an open question whether or not that is going to happen or whether Eva Guzman may force that runoff with Ken Paxton. But we are expecting to hear from George P. Bush later on this evening. But a couple of big questions tonight as we look at this campaign, this race for Attorney General going forward, and that is a couple of litmus tests underway here. Number one, Brian and Ashley, as you all have been talking about and as our guests have been talking about, really this is seen as something of a test for the Donald Trump endorsement. Of course, Donald Trump has endorsed Ken Paxton and urged voters to again support Ken Paxton for a third term as Attorney General. But George Bush also saying tonight, too, that he is continuing to court that endorsement as well, that he is still in touch with Donald J. Trump and his officials and urging them to actually flip their endorsement and send it to George Bush. Also a litmus test with regard to, as our previous guest was talking about, the kind of Republicanisms that Texans really want. Do they want a more traditional Republican in that role as Attorney General, hearkening back to the days of George W. Bush? Or do they want a more Trump-style Republican in that leading law enforcement or legal official for the state? Brian and Ashley.
Yeah, Tony, also worth noting, though, that former President Donald Trump and Congressman Louis Gohmert also very tight. And, you know, the endorsement of Paxton came out before Gohmert, entered the race. And the two of them were really going, Paxton and Gohmert, really going after that same base.
Absolutely, and Ashley, we saw that with the big Trump rally that happened in the Houston suburbs in recent weeks, that former President Trump, in fact, gave a resounding shout out to former Congressman Louis Gohmert, saying that he's a great guy who has served Texans well. So again, everyone sort of vying for that Trump endorsement. But again, Ashley, what people are talking about tonight is just how meaningful that endorsement is or isn't going to be to this race.
Tony Plahetsky reporting for us live. Tony, we thank you.
Wait, Tony, what's on the menu tonight? Anything good there you can tell us about at the watch party?
Well, I ate before I came, but I can tell you that I do.
What do you smell? Do you smell some barbecue?
There's some really well, it's exactly what I was going to say. Ashley Pizza, and it smells pretty great. We're at a brewery, by the way, in East Austin. It's described as a private party, but you can see there are dozens of people behind me. So the beer is flowing, and the pizza really smells delicious.
Wonderful.
But again, a wait and see
After 11.
from the Bush Camp out here in East Austin.
When it's done, Tony, you can get it when you one of those brews.
Absolutely.
Could be a late night there. Tony Polahetsky reporting live for his great work, as always.
But
Tony.
then
we cut him off there. He's excited, as most of those people in that AG's race. We're looking at the numbers as they come in. You can see on the Republican side, Ashley, that runoff might be happening on that side.
I think that runoff definitely is going to be happening. We have 24% reporting now, and Ken Paxton just at 42.3%. And again, what we're really watching, we just can't seem to say it enough, is Eva Guzman, former Texas Supreme Court Justice, and Land Commissioner George P. Bush, who are really going head to head now to see who's going to come in second place. Now, we want to bring in Travis County Republican Party Chair Matt Mackowiak to give us some more context about this tight Republican race as well as some of the other races. Matt, are you at one of these parties right now? Where are you?
I'm at can you hear me? Want to make sure you can hear me?
We can. Sound good.
Good, all right. We didn't have time for a sound check. I am at the Travis County GOP election night party at County Line on 2222. I just had some good barbecue myself. And for any of your viewers out there that are maybe in the Central Texas area, want to come join us, feel free. We'll be here for a while.
Yeah, Matt, obviously the AG's race is the race that we're watching, but for you, which one are you most in tune with right now?
Yeah, so let's kind of start with the statewide. If you look on the Republican side, the governor had a very successful night tonight. He looks like he's going to be around 68%. He had $15 million spent against him by Don Huffines, a former state senator from Dallas. Alan West is a national figure, was a member of Congress, was a state party chairman. He's in third place, pretty close to Huffines. But for the governor to be in this position, I think is a strong statement of the support the Republican voters have for him. He obviously has been pressured by the hard right by some of these candidates and some of these outside groups. From their standpoint, I think they feel like they pressured him during the legislative session and during the special sessions. So they may feel like there was some measure of success. But it was a very good night for the governor. If you look at Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had a big win by an even larger margin. His opponents were not serious and were not spending much money. Obviously, the Attorney General race is the most interesting, and you're going to have runoffs on both sides. It looks like Rochelle Garza is the leading candidate on the Democratic side. A couple candidates there vying for second, so they're going to have a primary runoff. On the Republican side, Ken Paxton is going to be in a runoff. He told a radio host in Dallas a couple days ago he thought there was a pretty good chance he might avoid a runoff entirely. So he's right now around 42%. We'll see where he is in Harris County. Obviously, Guzman and Bush are neck and neck. That's a reflection, I think, of Guzman, number one, being Latina, number two, being female, and having some differentiation among the other candidates. Could be a reflection of some Bush fatigue among Republican Party voters across the state of Texas. Here's the interesting thing. Harris County is not going to report tonight. Absolutely ridiculous for that to be the case for the largest county in our state, an urban county the primary electorate is small compared to a general election, and the fact that they can't report the same night, particularly from the early vote, is absolutely astounding. The important thing to understand there is Eva Guzman's from Harris County, so if she finishes second there, she's going to be in a very good position to probably make the runoff and knock out George P. Bush. George P.'s done well in the Rio Grande Valley, doing better than Eva Guzman was doing. That's an interesting thing to watch. But the important thing now is to see how the Election Day vote compares to the early vote. We have the early vote in a lot of the big counties. We're starting to see Election Day vote. We'll see how that affects the Attorney General race for that second place position.
Matt, let me ask you this. If Louis Gohmert's not in that race, is there a runoff?
No. And look, Louis Gohmert was recruited not because he was going to ever be the Attorney General of Texas, but because people that recruited him wanted him to help force a runoff. And that story will someday get told more fully. But no, Louis' vote came from Ken. There's no question about that, particularly in East Texas, where his congressional district is. He's at 10 or 12%. If Ken's at 42 and he gets 3/4 of Louis' vote, he avoids a runoff entirely. So I think the Attorney General understood that risk was there when Louis got recruited into this race. I would say one thing: Ken Paxton is going to be a strong candidate in the runoff. You have to understand the primary turnout on both sides, Republican and Democratic side, is always going to be more to the base in a primary runoff, and the turnout's going to be smaller. You have more base voters than you do casual voters. And so for Paxton, the fact that he's going to be running from the conservative side, whether Eva Guzman or George P. Bush challenge him more from the center, that's an advantage for him. The question is going to be, can he raise money in the runoff over a 10-week period? That is going to be the big question. Does President Trump stick by him? I don't see why he wouldn't. And can he go out and raise $1 million or $1.5 million or $2 million in 10 weeks? If he can do that, he is going to win the runoff. We'll see who his opponent is. That's going to obviously affect the race and affect fundraising.
But you don't think that the indictment or the FBI investigation is going to weigh into that runoff at all?
The only way I think, certainly, let me answer that two ways. First, when you have 4 candidates running, there's a disincentive to go negative, because oftentimes what happens is when you attack someone, it hurts the person you're attacking, but it also hurts yourself, and it benefits a third party. So in that Republican race, you had 4 candidates running, and some of them went negative at the end, but none of them really went negative on a statewide basis as fully as they want to. Bush is chomping at the bit to go negative on Paxton, but he needed to get the runoff to do that. And Guzman, the same thing, but I assure you Paxton's chomping at the bit to go negative against whoever his more moderate challenger is going to be. Now, to the question you asked about his legal challenges, all you have at this point is the whistleblowers stepping forward, the resignations, and the allegations. You don't have an indictment, and as long as there's no indictment over the next 10 weeks, I think Ken's going to be just fine, particularly if he can raise money. If he's indicted over the next 10 weeks, that changes everything. We'll have to see. Look, I expect the 3 candidates who aren't Ken Paxton to unify and fight Ken. They're going to do that without question. They're going to oppose him. They're going to unify. They're going to raise money together. They're going to campaign together. The question is going to be, can Ken raise money, and does President Trump stick with him? And if that happens and there's no indictment, I think Ken's going to win probably 60-40 in the runoff.
Okay, one more thing though, because I just can't let it go. You say not indicted, but he is indicted from those previous charges that he still hasn't gone to court on. What if that, I mean, that's some of the point that we've seen from Guzman, Bush, and Gohmert is them saying if he goes to court for that, if he gets indicted on the other stuff, the Democrats are going to take this seat. Or do you think that won't happen between now? Court case not going to happen between now and November?
No, you're right. He has 2 separate legal issues. The first is an indictment, a felony indictment for securities fraud. That case has been pending for 2 years, and I don't think it's going to get resolved anytime soon. There's a huge squabble over whether taxpayers have to pay for that. For the special prosecutors who are handling that case, they have not paid for it, so those people are not willing to do more work. It's been on hold for quite a while. This latest issue, I think, is much more fundamental. It's more of it's more serious legally. It's more serious politically, but at this point, he's not been charged with anything. So all you have really is an allegation. If the first indictment were to move forward in the next 10 weeks, which I don't expect, I don't think anyone expects, if that did move forward, that would be a problem. If the second issue were to move forward and become charges or an indictment against him over the next 10 weeks, that would also be a problem. I think the odds of both of those are pretty low, but obviously those are variables that Ken Paxton can't control. And whoever's in the runoff with him are going to make his ethical issues, his legal challenges, front and center. Paxton's going to say, I've been a conservative attorney general. I've fought the Biden administration. I supported the Trump agenda. And he's going to hope that's enough for the conservative voters who are going to turn out in the statewide primary runoff. And my suspicion is it will be enough.
All right, Matt McCobiac, chair of the Travis County Republican Party. We thank you so much for taking some time to join us. We'll let you get back to that.
Wait, we didn't get him on the record, Matt. Bush or Guzman? Who's it going to be?
Yeah, I think it's going to be Guzman at this point, because that presumes that she wins Harris County, which we won't know about till tomorrow. But if she wins Harris County, I think all the bets are off. Now, again, the other thing we have to wonder is, does the election day vote change? All we see right now, what you're looking at right now, is primarily early vote.
Right.
And Bush and Paxton both started going after Guzman at the end. There's a chance she's going to underperform on election day relative to the early vote. So if that's true, it very well may be Bush. This is going to be a 1 or 1.5 point race by the time it's all called in terms of who's in the runoff, and it may take us 7 or 10 days before we know.
Well, I want to point this out on our numbers right now. 895,612 votes counted. Guzman and Bush have exactly the same number of votes. 187,550, 187,550. It doesn't get any closer than that, man.
It doesn't get any closer than that. And keep in mind, we're going to have about 1.8 million votes on the Republican side. So you have about half the vote in.
That is
so there's a long way to go. We're not going to know for quite a while.
All right. You happy you got him on the record?
Matt, that was fantastic. We always appreciate your time.
Good to see y'all.
Matt Mackowiak joining us tonight. It's a great perspective from Matt. He's always kind enough to join us to kind of break it down. That I did not expect that, Ashley.
Because just in the time that we were talking to Matt, it changed.
That is amazing.
And so that is, I mean, you can't get any more neck and neck.
Yeah. It just flipped. It just flipped.
Oh my. George
P. Bush now with just about 1,000 more votes, roughly 500 more votes
for now.
That's amazing how close that is. And again, that's just for the runoff. Paxton still with a decisive lead, really 2-1. But that runoff is what we're watching on that AG's race on the Republican side. Actually, that's as close as it gets.
Right. And you know, we say it's early. Yes, some races have been called, but look at this. Only 901,000 votes. We're expecting 1.85 million. 27% reporting.
Close to 2 million.
Still going to be a long, long night.
Hit Harris County real quick. I just want to see.
Oh, you messing with my hometown, and I feel the pressure.
Okay, there's Harris County, the early, and he was saying that they're not going to totally be counted. And this again, Ashley, is the early vote for Harris County.
And so you do see 0% reporting. And we do want to point out, we have heard about some issues in Harris County with elections, making sure that things were running smoothly, having enough poll workers.
Some mail-in issues too, if I'm not mistaken.
40% of the mail-in ballots had to be rejected because they did not follow the new requirements under Senate Bill 1, the new election law. So, but even when you take that out and you look at day of voting, there were some issues today in Harris County.
But I also want you to look. He said Eva Guzman, strong in Harris County. That is exactly what's showing. 30,000 votes to 15,000 votes. 2-1 over George P. Bush. If it comes down, Ashley, to Harris County for that potential runoff with Ken Paxton, Eva Guzman looks very strong in Southeast Texas.
Indeed, she does. And, you know, let's just go back out to looking at the entire state. You still have quite a bit, to come in. A lot of votes that we are still waiting to come in.
But look at those pine trees in East Texas, Ashley.
Well, they stood up for their congressman. I don't think there was any doubt in anyone's mind that East Texas was going to show up for Congressman Louis Gohmert. He is wildly popular there.
He is.
Not a shocker.
And I can't wait to hear the story, though, about how his candidacy essentially knocked Ken Paxton from a victory avoiding a runoff to potentially having to go to a runoff, and he's siphoning those votes. A lot of people say he's taking those votes directly from Ken Paxton.
Now, who told you that first?
A genius named Ashley Godot said Louis Gohmert's votes are coming directly, a lot of them. We don't count them ourselves, but a lot of the people that voted for Gohmert would have otherwise voted for Paxton, according to a lot of the experts. And you can see he has to get to 50%. He's at 42%.
It's strategy. I want you to remember that a lot of this in terms of who's running, there's no greater example of that than the folk who got Rick Perry to run for governor. And not that Rick Perry.
That's not that Rick Perry, but he got almost 29,000 votes.
Now we want to note, it didn't work how some thought it was going to work, which I personally am glad about because voters are smarter than that. So try again.
Well, 29,000 weren't. That just went up.
They might have liked Rick L. Perry, though.
Do we even know who that is at this point?
I mean, we've got some intel on him. Old Ricky is what they like to call him.
That's Ricky Perry?
Yeah, but Rick Perry for the ballot
purposes.
Better
than Steve Perry, if you ask me.
We're having way too much fun.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
We want to talk about some of the other, this is our hot races that we've been looking at. We haven't even gotten to talk to you about all of them.
There's some good ones down the ballot,
so let's just chat briefly about some of those races. And so when we look at the Republican race for Congressional District 35, 7% reporting Dan McQueen in the lead there, Brian. But if you use your scroll finger,
you're going to see a lot of names on this one. There will be a runoff. I think we're pretty comfortable saying there will be a runoff on the Republican side of District 35. Again, that's the strange district that runs all the way from Travis County to Bexar County. So we'll see what happens on the Republican side of that. But it sure looks like a runoff is headed our way that way.
And anytime you have that many candidates, that's what's going to happen. That many candidates and no big names. And here's why you don't have big names, because this is a Democratic district and it's been drawn this way and it's going to stay this way. And as of now, if we look at the Democrats, we still have former Austin City Council member Greg Casar, nearly 60% of the vote. He's claiming victory in this race, Brian.
He's claiming victory, and he's got a pretty strong statement to make with 23,244 votes counted. That's just over 1%. So still a lot of votes to count in District 35. 35. Greg Casar feels very comfortable saying he's going to be the winner in that race. Eddie Rodriguez, of course, hoping that's not the case. But from looking at the map, this is his color, which is the blue color. Look at it now. It's going to turn green. No, there's no green. There's no light blue. There's no yellow. It's all Greg Casar blue as you look at District 35 with, again, only 1% reporting right now.
Now, of course, District 35 is up for grabs because Congressman Lloyd Doggett is running for the newly created District 37, which is in the heart of Austin, includes Travis County, a bit, if you will, of Williamson County. This is one of those new districts that Texas gained. Texas gained 2 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives because of our population growth. The AP still not calling this race, but Congressman Doggett's sizable lead with 83% of the vote.
Yeah, he's got 35,000 of the 42,000 votes that have been cast. So I feel like Lloyd Doggett is going to sleep well tonight, Ashley.
Indeed he is. Before we get to some more of these congressional races, I just want to talk about these 2 other races, and these are some Texas House races, and this is what I put as a very, very hot race. This is House District 19. This was one of those newly drawn situations under redistricting, and I really, really want you to look at where these votes are happening. So you have former Austin City Council member Ellen Troxclair, who toyed with the idea of running for Senate, and then decided she was going to run for House. And you have Austin Police Officer Justin Berry, who I suppose we should say and mention now indicted Austin Police Officer Justin Berry, who is running in this race, and they're fairly close, Brian. 221 votes between the difference between the 2 of them.
That's right. It's a very, very close race. That one sure appears to be headed to a runoff on the Republican side of District 19. And you can see again, Ashley, where the votes are coming from. Burnett County, heavy Republican county. You can see a lot of Ellen Troxclair votes. If you cross the county line, you can see there Justin Berry, a police officer there on that side of the line, getting a very good support of, again, this is 41% reporting, only 8,500 votes. That's again an indicative of the low voter turnout, Ashley, we had in Travis County. I was hoping those numbers would go up today, but not much.
Well, we thought that they would, but again, this is what happens in primary elections. You let 25% of the population of the voting age, or not voting age, right, because everyone voting age isn't registered to vote. You let 25% of the registered voters make the decision for all the rest of us.
Yeah. Gotta vote.
Please vote, people.
That's right. What's the Democratic side of that one look like?
Yeah, when we look at not as many candidates.
Oh, that's right. Just one candidate.
Just the one.
Sorry about that.
So it's fine. The race called, of course, for payment. But we want to point out, again, you don't, this is also something we talk about, redistricting. You know why you don't have more candidates over here?
Because they're all in the other district.
Well, no, because one might argue that this district is drawn in a certain way to favor Republicans. That would be the argument that was made. Texas House 51 is interesting because this is State Representative, right? This is State Representative Eddie Rodriguez's district for Austin that he had for years and years and years and years, but stepped down so that he could run again. So it's a blue district, likely going to remain blue. So you only have 1 Republican. But take a look at this. All of the number of Democrats. Yeah, if you scroll, there's more to scroll, but a clear winner so far with 37% of the vote in tonight, Brian.
That's right. Maria Luisa Flores with 62% of the vote on that side. Again, this is the seat Eddie Rodriguez occupied for a long time. The Democratic side, 37% reporting. Again, we're not calling races here on KVUE. We let the Associated Press do that. But it appears that we have a front runner, a very strong front runner in District 51, the Texas House District. Again, that seat is open, ready for a new person to occupy it in the coming legislative session.
And you can say strong because look at that number of how many votes Ms. Flores has versus Mr. Ward. Like she is above more than 3,500 votes above him.
That's the number in the middle. That's how many votes behind the second candidate is, and that just went up. So yeah. Maria Luisa Flores should sleep well tonight.
Indeed, she should. All right, we want to get to some of the other races that we haven't been able to talk to you about. So let's pull up some of those. Not really surprising here, Brian, for Congressional District 17, incumbent Pete Sessions. This is one of those districts that includes parts of our viewing area, but he is well within the lead there.
The incumbent with just about 23,000 votes, 70%. So that looks like a solid victory for Pete Sessions, which isn't a surprise, Ashley. The incumbent, Pete Sessions, looks like he's going to be headed to November, trying to grab District 17 seat once again on the Republican side. That race is pretty far down the road with 20% reporting.
If we go and look at Congressional District 21, incumbent Chip Roy. Now, again, only 11% reporting, but a strong lead with 84% of the vote right now. Of course, this district includes, Blanco, Gillespie, Hayes, and Travis counties.
District 21 there, Chip Roy, looking like he's headed back to Washington, D.C., at least headed to the election in November as the Republican side of things on District 21 with, again, 84% of the vote. Robert Lowry trailing there significantly with just 8%. Again, 11% reporting tonight, but again, that's early voting and some of the early returns from tonight.
Yeah. Now, if we take a look at the Democratic side here, this is one of those races that is likely going to go to a runoff. We have Claudia Zapata with 45%, followed by Ricardo Villarreal at 29% of the vote. So looking like those two are headed to a runoff to face off against, right now, looking like Chip Roy in November.
That'll be a good runoff. Look at the vote totals right there. You can see about 3,400 votes separating the top two on the Democratic side in District 21. Again, the runoff will be in May. If it gets to that point, we'll have to watch and see the rest of the night.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a look at another one of the districts that we have here. All right, we're going to go to District 27, which is made up of Bastrop and Caldwell counties, and Congressman Cloud, strong lead here with 73% of the vote on the Republican side.
I think like the other two Republican sides of this congressional race we've seen with Chip Roy have a significant lead. We kind of expected Congressman Cloud to have that same lead going into tonight with about half. Look at this, 45% reporting, not called yet by the Associated Press, but I would assume their finger is on the button, Ashley.
Yeah,
they're getting pretty close to that one.
It's hard to make that up. It's hard to make up that type of a lead there.
Yeah. Yeah, District 27 there, the incumbent with a significant lead on that side. On the Democratic side, it's a little bit closer.
Well, it looks definitely like there is a front runner right now with Mr. Perez Jr. leading in this race. But again, this is one of those races where the district has been drawn in such a way that a lot of folks anticipate and expect it to stay as a red district. All right, let's move on to the next race in the U.S. House of Representatives. That should be District 31, I think. Oh,
there it is. You called it.
There it is. And we have incumbent John Carter, longtime congressman, former Judge Carter, leading with 70%. This is with 23% of the, 23% of the vote reporting. One of the things that's interesting, though, about this district is it changed, Brian, because this district used to, have more counties in it, but Burnett and Williamson County, for our viewers there, you guys are in District 31.
Again, no big surprise. In the primary, we expect the incumbents on the Republican side to have strong showings. Mike Williams, not a bad showing with 20% of the vote tonight. But Congressman John Carter, Judge Carter, doing great job of getting the votes out tonight, and he's got a big lead as we go into the evening hours.
All right. Well, that is all of the races that we're going to have for you online. But Brian, 10 p.m.
We have to stop. I enjoy this.
We have to. They're literally telling us wrap it up. Okay, so 10 p.m. tonight, hour-long coverage, and we're going to go through all of the races. We won't get to talk as much.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm worried about.
He's so sad about it.
Can we touch the screen just a couple of more times?
You want to do it one more time? What are they going to do? Who's going to stop you, Brian?
My fingerprints are all
It doesn't work.
This was fun.
They turned it off on us. And they're playing the music. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll have more Texas primary election coverage for you tonight on KVUE News at 10. We hope to see you there.